The room looks very different from this end.
Yes.
You guys look stunning, except I'm going to pretend you guys are not all here. You know, waking up in South Africa every day, one is tempted to just go back to bed and bury your head in the sand. From the moment you lock your doors and make sure that you set the alarm, you reverse out of your gate and make sure that, with me, I tell Kellogg's, our dog, go check if nobody's at the gate. Because I have to reverse out and hoping that nobody's standing out there with some sinister motive. The first beggar that you meet at the first traffic sign that you're at. And then you proceed, and then there's traffic, and you are basically tempted to start this tirade of despondence. And I wonder, who am I expecting to change the tide? Because when I was a young person myself, I had hope. And I was a young person who was growing up in the 1980s. So when I went to university, I almost had a picture of how I want my life to turn out. And then I look up to the gentleman called Henry Nestle. And he was working in Switzerland as a chemist at a time when there was high infant mortality. I could imagine that at some point he could have felt that maybe I must just go back and bury my head in the sand because no amount of medication was going to help the children. The kids were dying. And if you're going to talk about demographic dividend and you're not going to look at keeping kids alive, you've got none. You do not have a dividend to speak of. He basically looked at the environment within which he was operating at and came up with a milk-based porridge to feed infants who were dying in Switzerland at the time. I mean, if you know the history of Switzerland, you know that they were one of the poorest countries in the world. And if you look at them now, you see the pioneering spirit, the innovation, the entrepreneurial spirit that has always been abundant in that space. So Henry Nestle took it upon himself to find a solution that would work. And in fact, that is the heritage of our company. That is the legacy that we live by. So I look at that and I think of my issues and I think, but surely I should be part of the solution instead of complaining about the fact that government is not doing anything, because government on its own will never do anything. It is not possible to deal with a legacy of 365 years of oppression and expect that it will be solved within 21 years. It is not possible. And this is where industry comes in. And this is the responsibility that we need to start thinking about logically as, if you're going to operate in a market like ours, owned by the Swiss, do you understand the environment within which you're operating? It cannot be business as usual. I'm sure it was back in the day, you know, when we envisioned this image of this picture of how Nestle would look like in future. Because we are 150 years old globally, we are 100 years old in South Africa. It's a phenomenal story. I mean, I look at that and think we are a food company, meaning that for as long as people are alive, people must eat. And therefore, we need to be relevant and provide the food that people need so that they can stay alive. We are in all the countries in the world, either physically through our operations or by having products that we basically take to those countries. We've got over 2,000 brands. We have approximately 1 billion servings every day of our products that we serve. And we've got 40 R&D centers across the world, and we've got 40 innovation hubs. This is the innovation part that I talked about, that Henry started the company by doing. Innovating products or renovating the ones that you have so that you can keep nations alive. Our purpose. I think this is the one thing that when I look back or I read his history, which I do from time to time because I have to sometimes represent the company in platforms like this, we need to understand why do we exist and why do we do what we do. And yes, we are in the business of food, but we are in the business of keeping people alive, enhancing quality of life, and contributing to a healthier future. That's what we do. So basically, I'm sure we're one of the few companies that basically looks after humans before birth, cradle, and just before death. That's a bit morbid, but we are in the business of even keeping people alive in ICU. And we keep pets alive. We keep pets at the trade, we make foods, we make beverages, we make coffee. In other markets, we've got a whole spread. We've got competitors that span from chocolate to pizza, because that's how big we are as a company. We have grown exponentially. And again, it came out of the one purpose that as a company, we are going to make sure that we enhance quality of life wherever we're going to be operating. But most importantly, we will understand the dynamics where we're operating. And we have values that basically underpinned by respect, through which we live by. And I think for me, one would ask me the question, I think as recent as last week, so how do you make sure that all your Nestle colleagues and employees understand the purpose? How do you make sure that all the people at your factories wake up and know this is what we we are doing with the chocolates that we manufacture, with the food that we produce. How do we make sure that we reconcile everybody's purpose and make sure that we speak from the same hymn book? And we basically talk about respect. And I think for me, if we're respecting the individuals and families that we delight, because this is what we also do as a company, and helping 50 million children lead healthier lives. Communities where we're operating in, because you cannot have a relationship or basically survive as a company on your own. You need people that are going to keep you sustainable. The planet that we, I think, can all agree as industry, maybe some more than others, have depleted because for a very long time we were inward looking, we were manufacturing, we had operations, and we did not think for a second of the environmental impact that we're having. But we had to step back and start basically introspecting and saying, how is it that we contributed to the current state that we're in? And hence, we had to redefine our purpose and say that we have to have respect for all the 3 tiers within the societies that we're operating in. This is our footprint. Again, like I said, we're in all the countries in the world, be it by physical presence or by products. We're in Americas, Asia, Oceania, and Africa, and we're in Europe, which also looks after the Middle East and North Africa. Our research capability is quite massive. I mean, we've got approximately 500 PhDs that work in any of those innovation hubs and research centers. Our aim is to make sure that we manufacture the type of foods that is not only of the highest quality, but that is very safe, so that when you sip your coffee, the first thing in the morning, which is Nescafe, you basically hold it up and you have a smile on your face because you know that the people that manufactured it put every single one of their effort in it. So that is why we basically wake up in the morning to make sure that the first cup of coffee, that espresso that keeps you going, was manufactured under the best conditions in the facilities that we own. These are our people. And I think for me, I could have started with them saying that it is not possible without the people that make Nestle alive. It is not systems, it is not processes, it is not standard operating procedures. All of them have a place, but it is the people that wake up every morning in all the different time zones and say that we are going to work for this company and we're going to engender goodwill and we're going to do and live our purpose. And basically what we do is always striving to have a positive impact on society. I think for me, Henry Nestle had that picture in his mind, why he existed or why his company existed and what his real purpose is. So when we wake up in the morning as a company, and yes, in 2007, we had to rethink what is it that we're doing. We had to look at futuristically, where do we want to be in the next 150 years? Do we want to be known as a company, and how do we want to be envisioned as? And we're always striving to basically have a positive impact in society. And we look at our footprint in terms of carbon emissions, because we've got factories. And you have to basically look at what are the strategies to make sure that we reduce our carbon emissions. How do we save water in all the manufacturing processes? How many servings of food are our food fortified? And if they're fortified, are we accessible where we should be accessible? Do all the children who have to have access to our food have the food? Do we work with our suppliers? Do they know how they need to produce the materials that we use? Do they understand the quality, and do they understand the degradation of the planet? And to what extent do we then put in place systems to make sure that they understand that we need to be in this journey for the long term? And of course, some of you will recognize, I'm hoping all of you recognize some of those products. Some of them, you must have grown up with them. And this is who we are. And it is not the whole spread. It's just some of the categories that I thought I would put up here. But most of them are global, and we have some of them who also manufacture locally, because we've got approximately 92% of all our products are manufactured in South Africa. So we're also a proudly South African company. So when we found creating shared value, or our former chairperson, Mr. Brabeck, met Mr. Kramer and Mr. Porter at one of the World Economic Forums, creating shared value, or what we were doing, had a name. Because I think in all our efforts, we had always tried to be relevant in the markets where we're operating. If you're going to be working with the farmers, how are you supporting the farmers? I mean, the whole notion of being self-serving and being a capitalist company trying to generate profit would not work in the long term. If you're working with communities, how are you supporting those communities to extend that your efforts are not only less philanthropy or just putting opening soup kitchens, but you are ensuring that people have got sustainable means to then come back and buy your products. Because I think that's what it's about. If you want to become a company that is going to be in existence in the next 100 years, we have to make sure that we build people that will be able to afford it. Because I'm not going to be eating some of the stuff that I'm eating now. I mean, weight loss and age and everything else in between. But obviously, my son is going to want to indulge in some of those things. And we need to make sure that we exist, because the quality of life that we have promised ourselves to enhancing will remain for us as paramount. So we basically looked at what the creating shared value ethos means. And basically, I'm not going to repeat it because I think you guys have seen the slides for the past 2 days. So it's not like a big revelation. But we need to generate profit that has a conscience. And I think Africa presents a brilliant opportunity for us, given its challenges. And there's a myriad of the challenges. But how are we going to tap into those opportunities and make sure that, to Master Celia's point, we tap into the demographic dividend? Because it's not going to happen by osmosis. Somebody's going to have to put in the hours, the sweat, and the money to make sure that it happens. It has happened in other countries. And it happened because there was political will, and companies knew that they needed to be part of the solution. So Africa cannot become a basket case, because frankly, I get very tired to see pictures of the same thing over and over and over again, almost as if as a people we're not thinking. We need to start thinking about how sustainably do we grow ourselves as companies, how do we work with governments, and I can imagine that for our governments sometimes can be a bit challenging, especially now. But fact is, we need to make sure that we come up with solutions that are sustainable so that we can start realizing that demographic dividend, because most of them are going to start thinking of leaving Africa and going to some of those countries, except those countries are not all open now anymore. I mean, immigration is now becoming one of the biggest talking points. It's not as easy as it used to be it in the 40s, the 50s, or the 70s. So we need to come up with solutions now. I need to present a value proposition for my son to believe that South Africa has hope. And as a 14-year-old boy right now, discussing with me what is happening and the fact that it looks like we are in a state of flux, I need to be at least aware of what his preoccupations are and to what extent will other worlds accept him. And the way things are now, it means that we need to create that hope right here. So we basically then decided that as a company, we're going to go back to basics and say, we are going to basically make sure that wherever we are operating as a company, we are going to create value. We are going to make sure that the farmers that we work with are going to be sustainable. We're going to make sure that the employees that we employ will not only have an enhanced quality of life, but they can pinpoint that after joining Nestle, this is how my life was radically changed. We're going to make sure that people that we engage with on a day-to-day, governments that we talk to, understand what the vision is and how we hope to get to that vision and what we're going to be doing in partnership with them, because it has to be a meaningful, mutually beneficial partnership. And it is where our chairperson decided that he's going to entrench this ethos, this philosophy, in all the Nestle markets. So when you step outside of Nestle South Africa, you go to Nestle Kenya, or you go to Nestle Japan, you are going to hear the very same message of creating shared value. We have to be a brand that is known or that is perceived to be a responsible company that understands the environments within which it operates and that wants to create at least consumers, if for nothing else, who are going to be able to support or to consume your products. Because you are in the business of business, you're not in the business of donating food. And how do you ensure that you are going to remain sustainable? It is only through those people, you guys, who are going to consume our products, who are going to believe in the quality of those products, and that we are a company that really cares, that will keep us sustainable in the long term. And within this sphere, we have to demonstrate responsible behavior by ensuring that we are compliant. And we need to make sure that we look at our national norms, international norms, national business principles, and make sure that, above all else, we remain economically viable. There's not much you can do if you keep declaring non-profits year on year. You're going to have to keep yourself afloat to the extent that you're able to contribute meaningfully in the countries that you're operating. And I think for me, the issue of compliance, it's a bit unfortunate that you have to be forced sometimes to do something that you should know that morally it is the right thing to do. But sometimes governments have to be forced to regulate so that then they're able to ensure that people or companies do the right thing. And this is basically Nestle South Africa. We are a subsidiary, 100% owned by Nestle Switzerland. So we are completely Swiss. Our DNA is Swiss. I'm Swiss. But I've got a serious South African flavor. Everything about us is Swiss. And that's how we're able to sustainably grow in South Africa for 100 years. So 50 years, after Nestle South Africa, Nestle Switzerland was started, Nestle South Africa came to being. And yes, I think Egypt and I think Arif mentioned the fact that other companies, I used to think that we're probably one of the oldest, so it's quite sad to know that not really, but we have the same pedigree as what the visionaries of our companies actually envisioned when they started this business. And we've been here for 100 years. It's something that we're particularly proud of. And our products are proudly South African because we've got those products that only speak to our market in South Africa that we do not have in any other market across the world. And again, very quickly, in terms of understanding who we are and the environment within we operate in, you know, there's a very nice cartoon that I was looking for to show how sometimes you feel like you're squeezed and you know, you're in a straitjacket and you can't even break free because of the challenges that I basically alluded to before. But this is what it is, and there's not much we can do with our current situation, but we can certainly work towards making sure that we change the current situation for something much better than what it is. And it can never, ever happen through philanthropy. It has to be part of a business strategy that consciously says that every single line manager in all the areas that we're operating in, whether it's in technical, supply chain, whether it's in communication, you respond to what we want to achieve as a company, but we also look at societal challenges, and we integrate the sustainable development goals within our own operations. I don't think it's rocket science. I think it's something that can be done. In fact, it has been done in other parts of the world. We need to start doing it in Africa or in our shores so that we can have a better value proposition for our children. And basically, we all know what those issues are. I mean, every day, education. The fact that we've got kids who go to private schools and former model schools in this country, they are a drop in the ocean because you still have about 25,000 schools, and averaging 1,000 kids who need a better education. And we are not doing anybody a special favor by thinking that we can ignore education. Those are the same kids that we'd like to have in our establishments. You cannot only survive with Ivy League children. Those ones become very entrepreneurial very quickly, they leave. They find opportunities. So we need to start where the problem is. Health is the problem. We all know it. We're not in the business of health, we are in the business of food. But how can we impact positively on health? We looked at infant mortality, and we had an opportunity to basically be part of a Making a Difference trust with MNET, and we were able to put in a pediatric theater fully kitted at Baragwanath Hospital. Now somebody will say, but why would you do that? At some point, those littlies are going to need our products. For now, they need to be kept alive. And this is how we basically were able to bring it back to our business to say, we are going to be doing this for Frere Hospital and for Baragwanath Hospital to make sure that the doctors, when they are doing surgery on even the youngest little one who is a couple of hours old, they can still teach. It is state of the art, it's German, not Swiss, but it serves the same purpose. It is keeping infants alive, and it's one of the things that we're very, very proud of. And this is what I mean by, if you have to integrate it within your business, it has to be part of the business model and not something that is outside of that. So we have to think sustainably and futuristically about where do we want to go. Obviously, poverty alleviation, guys, we need to create jobs. We need to build more manufacturing facilities. We need to think about more innovations. We need to create local jobs because we need to build hope. Some of the things that are happening in our country are not happening by fluke. It's because there is, some of them, there's a causal link between lack of employment or hope and the fact that you've got a group of young people who have got absolutely nothing to think about but how to go get an income, and you become the income. Poor infrastructure, we can lament the fact that we've got poor infrastructure, yes, but what are we doing about it? And while we mull over all the key challenges, we still have to do what preoccupies us the most, and this is basically growth profitability, making sure that access to food and food that is affordable, of the highest quality, that we need to source at the right places. We need to be able to make sure that our farmers understand the importance of keeping, I think among others, if you look at rotation, for instance, crop rotation, how can they grow this the next time? And that should be part of our value chain. All the materials that they produce, we should be able to use them in our manufacturing processes so that they're part of our entire value chain. And we need to start having an entrepreneurial business model. We cannot be overwhelmed by the millennials because sometimes they can really do that. And I didn't think that I'm that far in age to them, but they can really overwhelm you. We need to tap into that energy. There's a lot of that energy. They think. That's all they do every single time they think. And this is very quickly the grid with which we basically share with our external partners, be they government or people that we want to be in partnership with in terms of our contribution to this market. If you look at I mean, we are small compared to some of the bigger markets that we're operating in. But I think we also create or have created, because this is not cumulative. So if we were to do a cumulative picture of how we look like, we have added a lot of, or created a lot of value in this country. And I think this is something that we really have to be proud about, and we need to redo it over and over and over again so that we can build a sustainable business, but equally so, a sustainable community of South Africans.